To celebrate Black history and accomplishment, the Post and Courier once again presents this series of video interviews featuring 12 dynamic leaders to know in South Carolina. We talk with people from all over the state about their efforts to advance social justice, celebrate Black culture and enterprise, address community needs, and create a better world. Our videos will be released monthly on the Post and Courier website through January 2024. To watch and to read our 12 profiles, plus essays on Martin Luther King Jr., go to postandcourier.com/Black History. Join us again this year in learning about some of our state's remarkable change agents.
Well, greetings everyone. This is Ricky Dennis here, and we are with the Reverend Demitt Jenkins, who is, let me read it so I don't mess up the title because it is very important. She is the International African American Museum's Lilly Director of Education and Engagement for Faith-Based Communities.
Yes.
So we are so excited and happy to have Reverend Jenkins here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Reverend, if you can just start let's talking about where we're located. This location is the Moving Star Praise House. So you can just, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about this location and its connection to your family and that legacy.
Yes. So this is the Moving Star Hall Praise House, and the Moving Star Hall was formerly the Moving Star Association, where the people on these islands, these sea islands, came together, paid dues, so that if there was ever a crisis, people needed money, or there was a funeral and expenses were high and families needed assistance, this association would help each other out. And so as a result of the association, then it became the Moving Star Hall. And then as a result of the people here who gathered for meetings and events and programs and discussing what was going on in the world and in the community, and then the people came and they would sing and they would pray and they would, just kind of gather to really like, what's happening in our community? Right. What do we need to do? How do we need to step up? What do we need to be activating ourselves and doing? Yeah. So, this hall, I'm telling you, if these walls and these floors could give voice to the conversations, to the way in which they were just trying to come together to how do we fix the problems in our community and in our world. And these Sea Island folks who didn't have a whole lot of money and didn't have a whole lot of education, but had a whole lot of wisdom and certainly a whole lot of faith.
Your grandparents were leaders of this kind of community that we're talking about, and those ideas and those values. So just share with us a little bit about your grandparents and your parents, and of course yourself, and how they impacted you.
So my grandparents, like many other people on this island, so we give credit to them, but they don't deserve all of the credit. There were many other people whose names are not written in history books, but they were also heroes and sheroes out here on these Sea Islands who did amazing things for this community. And so my grandparents, Janie and Esau Jenkins, were just, amazing people who came out the womb almost trying to fix the world's problems and to make sure that our people were cared for, were taken care of, and given equality and equal rights. And so, and that's what they did. They fed people. No different than other families out here, right? My grandfather just had an entrepreneurial mind. You know, he was always trying to figure out ways, how do we support our people? And how do we do that in the best ways that we can? And so, you know, people lived out here on the island, and when there wasn't a bridge, you know, people had to take a boat, you know, to get to Charleston. Then when they finally did, create paved roads and bridges, he bought transportation so that people had a way to get from the islands to the city of Charleston, which right now seems like, okay, 10, 15-minute ride, no big deal. But, but that's where work was. That's where education was. And so he, provided transportation so that people could get back and forth. And then on those bus rides, you know, he helped people to learn the literacy tests so that they would have a right to vote. How honorable and privileged it is to be able to say, I voted, right? When we didn't have that right before. And you had to learn that test, that literacy test, so that you could do that. And those people learned that literacy test on that bus ride to Charleston, so that they had the honor and privilege of voting. So it's things like that. We my family, we talk about it so much that, you know, it just seems natural. But to think about the times, how hard the times were, where it was not, favorable for a black man or a black woman to be in the public eye, fighting for justice and condemning wrong, and doing something about it, to have transportation, to own a store, and restaurants and motels, like that wasn't common at that time. But we were just grateful that they were courageous. You know, they didn't let anything step in their way to say, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, that might be a problem for my family. We're just very proud of that.
What a story. And, you know, as much as we could, talk about the late Esau and Janie Jenkins, we are not highlighting them in this section. We are highlighting the Reverend Demitt Jenkins, who comes from that tradition. So you were, well, first of all, you were born actually in France, which I think is a cool thing to know.
Yes, I was one. I was probably one when we came back to Charleston. So I have no memory of that, but yes, I was born in France.
So you're born, you come back to Charleston. Tell us what life is like for you growing up, and just kind of what shaped and molded you into the person you would eventually become. Absolutely.
I think caring for people and being able to help people is just in my DNA. It's just who I am and how I was shaped and molded, but also in my blood. And, you know, to see both my grandparents always serving the community, always helping people, to see my father and my mother doing the same thing. I tell the story all the time that my mother never passed a stranger on the road, on the highway. She just always stopped for somebody. And, you know, when you're a teenager, you're kind of like, oh, my God, we're stopping again. You know, like, oh. So after a while, I didn't get out the car. You know, I just kind of sat in the car and waited, because I kind of knew the people were going to be coming to our car, either to wait in the car, or she was going to take them to their next destination, or she was going to take them home to our house. And when they got there, she gave them food on her best china, her best dinnerware, and she made them comfortable until either somebody came to pick them up or whatever the next result was. And so I saw that. My mother, anybody who came to the door, she welcomed them in. That was during the time where it was safe.
Right.
But she entertained people and always had conversation, always made people feel very welcome. And I just observed that. I saw that. And it's what really helped shape me. My dad was always doing things in the community, serving on several boards and very active. And so my grandparents' legacy, my parents shaped me to really think about, how do I live in the world? How do I engage people? How do I make people feel welcome? And I just have naturally done that. And love to do it. I love to do it.
At Charles River, we are thousands of difference makers across the globe.
United by one purpose.
Together we create healthier lives.
Achieving this purpose requires diverse perspectives
and experiences to advance scientific breakthroughs.
And an inclusive workplace
that brings out the best in all of us.
When we succeed at this,
our innovation flourishes,
enabling us to deliver the highest quality, equitable outcomes
to our community, customers, and each other.
And to help protect the safety of patients around the world.
We are better.
We are better
together.
Together.
We are better
together.
I feel the passion, and that when you speak about just your love for service, I can feel that coming from you.
Yeah. And that's not always, people don't always appreciate that about folks, but I don't make any apologies for it. It's just who I am. And if that's not who someone else is or likes to do, or that's the kind of way they want to be with people in the world, God made me how I am. And I'm going to serve God. I am going to serve the people. I've learned in that process, I can't always just be a giver, that I have to be a receiver as well. Because you can't just always give to people, because that makes you feel good to give. And sometimes we're resistant when someone wants to give you something, because you think you're supposed to be the giver. You're supposed to make other people feel good. And you forget that you block their blessing by not allowing them to do what God has shared with them to do. And so we have to be good givers and good receivers.
That is so powerful. So we'll kind of speed up. So you grow up, you get your bachelor's, you eventually decide to get your MDiv, and begin this life of ministry. We were chit-chatting earlier, and you were talking about the location and how this space has kind of a different and unique meaning for you, as opposed to if we were doing this at the museum, because this is representative of your roots. But everything you have just shared, I think it's important that we hear that you're bringing that with you into this role, in this position at the museum. So just talk about that. Talk about the job in and of itself, what you're going to be responsible for, and how you're kind of bringing that ministry, that desire for service into this position.
Absolutely. So when I saw this position, this was in 2018. It described, a faith-based person who will travel around the world, who will connect with houses of worship, religious institutions, theological, educational institutions, and to talk about the museum, to bring some of the history of what we're going to do at the museum to these faith communities. I thought, that's me. That is me. I love meeting people. I love sharing history. I love making intersections and connections from agency to organization and organization to agency. And so when I read it, I thought, oh my God, that God just wrote this job for me. I've never worked in a museum before. I'm not considered a public historian. I grew up in a house where we learned about our African history. I always knew Jesus was black in our house, and so, my parents, taught African history. My dad and my uncle, did that in the community. So they brought that to our home. So I had that piece, but I just saw that job as, oh my gosh, this is a way to connect everyone around the world to what we're doing here in Charleston.
Yeah.
Ground zero, where our ancestors were forced to travel that transatlantic slave trade and step foot on the ground here in Charleston.
Yeah.
So it just spoke to me. And as a clergy person, I wanted to make sure our houses of worship, no matter what their faith traditions were, that they understood the history and understood Charleston's history and the international component that we're often talking about. Because we want people to know what our history is prior to being shackled and enslaved. That before, people came here at 50 years old. 60 years old. So what were they doing prior to being forced to this country? So we want to talk about the continent of Africa and other places where our ancestors lived and cultivated life, so that people don't think life began when they entered this country in shackles. That's not where our story begins. That's an addendum to the story, but it's not where our story begins. So I felt very honored, I feel very honored to be able to work at the International African American Museum, a non-museum expert, but a lover of life and people, and love to engage people to the work that we're doing. That's what I pride myself on, and that's what I enjoy doing every day.
Talk a little bit about what you all have been doing thus far. So you've been having some events and some programs. Share a little bit about what you all have been doing and potentially what's on the horizon.
So we, most of us started, the full-time staff began around June, July 2018. And so since then we've been adding to our team. But the museum, is going to open this year. But we've been doing programs and events since, the past 5-6 years. So, and what we mean by programs, we may have had a webinar on various subject matters. We've done a lot of faith-based programs, particularly during COVID. We've had to, kind of pivot like the world did. And so we are doing conferences, we are doing summits, we're doing forums, we're doing webinars. And so we had, because part of my role is to engage all faith traditions. So one of the first 6-week series that we had was around the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we had 6 panelists for 6 weeks. So we had a variety of professors, theologians, community people, those who are in the Islamic and Muslim faith, who presented various topics and subject matters. Very successful. We partnered with the Muslim community and Muslim Journal to host this particular webinar. Amazing. Amazing. And so what we have coming up now, we have a woman who is going to talk about other religions that around voodoo and African religions that are practiced now. So we'll have that on February the 21st as a webinar. So we're trying to make sure that we touch points with all faith traditions, or those that don't consider themselves a faith tradition, but it's under the umbrella of religion or spirituality. Because we're not a Protestant organization, right? We don't just do Christian, have Christian conversations or workshops. So we're really intentional about making sure that we're connecting with all faith traditions.
And I was going to ask about that too. What it sounds like that part of the message is to say that yes, we understand that the majority or the dominant faith community is Christianity among African Americans. Black churches been been what it has been.
But it's not the only.
Yeah,
But it's not the only.
you know, the Muslim community, I think in terms of the history of Charleston, has been very much present.
Yes, I mean they were part of this transatlantic slave trade as well. So we can't just have tunnel vision around who we think the people are who had this, you know, transatlantic slave trade experience, or even what life on the international side. So we have to be intentional about you know, sharing that history, talking about all religions and all faiths. You know, we just encourage people to, well, even if it's not your religion that you practice, be educated about what it is, and not hear whatever the rumors are about it, or whatever the false narratives that people say about religions that they're not familiar with. You know, be educated. Attend the webinar to learn more about it.
When I think about Black history, which is really American history, there's so much that we can learn from the past.
We support all entrepreneurs, and that there is a space for every type of entrepreneur in our ecosystem.
Is a celebration to raise the awareness of the contributions of African Americans.
Honoring the past, present, and future. Visit greenvillesc.gov/Black History for more.
So outside of that, which obviously consumes a lot of your time, what else do you want folks to know about you? What else do you do, hobbies or interests, anything like that?
Yeah, you know, I love crisis work.
Okay.
So I served as a chaplain, and when I served as a chaplain, I had 2 jobs in that role. So I worked in the ER, and so every crisis, and I worked at level 1 trauma hospital. So all the worst of the worst come to that hospital. And so I worked in the ER, and any and everything, whether it's a car wreck, a gunshot wound, a homicide, domestic violence, or just someone just got sick at an event, I surrounded that table with those doctors and nurses when they brought that patient or patients in. The ER, so to help settle them down, because I'm at the table with them while the doctors and nurses are working on that patient, trying to keep them calm if that's what the situation is, or even the family members and friends who have come to the hospital, just trying to keep things calm and keep them informed. And it takes a skill set to be in a crisis, you know, where people's anxieties are high and their fears are elevated, and so to really keep calm and keep people informed about what's happening. So I love that. So I work volunteer as a crisis chaplain here in Charleston with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy Organization. So still responding to homicides and really severe death situations. So I love it. I just, my adrenaline flows, and I kind of operate really well in crisis moments. So I haven't given that up, even though I'm now working at the museum and doing education and engagement. I still feed my soul by being able to serve in crisis moments.
Powerful. And we are just so privileged to be in your presence and to hear your witness.
Yes,
So
definitely the
you.
witness.
Is there anything that you can share about the museum in terms of projected timeline for opening, or
no projection yet. When our board meets, they will have that conversation around what's the best time to open if some of the issues and problems have been resolved. So we're on pins and needles as well, anticipating a new date. We look forward to being able to have the community, the world, to come and see this awesome museum. We have those 2 levels, which are African Ancestor Memorial Garden, which is just such a beautiful space. And then we certainly have all of our exhibitions on the second level. That includes Gullah Geechee and South Carolina Gallery, and certainly our Center for Family History. So we are wanting people to see it and experience it and be a part of it. So as soon as we know, the world will know.
Wonderful, wonderful. One thing I think that does come up when we talk about the faith history of Charleston is especially as it relates to race as well. How that dynamic has continued to play out. So I think most recently, especially following the Mother Emanuel tragedy, in which the 9 individuals were killed by white supremacists, you had all of these efforts of churches, white and black, coming together, and doing other kind of efforts like First Baptist in downtown, having the plaque that kind to recognize that they had enslaved persons once seated in that area. So I guess where I'm getting at is how with the museum, or what do you think about how you all tell that story in a way that tells the truth, but is
I think the museum serves as a place and a space where those conversations can take place, and I think we will do that. I think we're not afraid to enter into conversations that are crucial yet sensitive, but yet necessary. And if we don't talk about race and reconciliation, or race and racism, then we're just contributing to, us not getting to a point of, I don't know if we'll see in our lifetime resolve, but we got to move through it. And if we just keep surface conversations, that's the only thing we're going to see is surface results. We got to get in it. And my belief is, if we're going to talk about race and racism, we got to start with our childhood. We got to start with, what were those messages that you heard or that you observed? What did your parents or grandparents say to you about people of a different hue? What did you hear in your churches? What did you hear in your communities, your schools? Like, we got to start there. Where did those messages come around 6, 7, and 8 years old? And what do you recall? Because some people were told emphatically, don't you like, don't deal with, and some just might have said it subtly, or just they heard, as a child, you overhear a conversation. Like, what did you get? And how did that begin to shape and form your teenage thoughts, and then your adult thoughts and ways of being? And so I think we got to go back there if we're going to deal with what do I believe about who you are and what you look like, or how I understand you as a man or a woman. Like, we got to go back to the beginning and move our way up to those conversations if they're going to be true and authentic, in my opinion.
So for you, and you shared this earlier, it appears that it was instilled in you very early on who you were, and what it meant to be African American, what it meant to be black, what it meant to be a black Christian. So would you consider that being part of kind of what you're talking about when you think about early childhood conversations as or am I off?
No, I think it does start there, but I also think if we're going to ask specific questions about what do you understand about people who look different from you?
I see.
And where did that message come from? Did somebody say it to you that to not like these people? Or how did you understand it? Or maybe you didn't get that at all. Maybe your household was like, no, everything that I saw and heard was about loving all people. But that's not everybody's story. So if we're going to talk about race and racism,
Yeah.
in my opinion, we got to go back to where those first thoughts began.
Yeah.
And what do those messages now say? Because I still got to push pause on some of the messages I understood.
Like what, for example?
You know, like to not trust people who didn't look like me because they didn't mean me well.
Yeah.
Now, did anybody say that to me emphatically? No. But somehow I got that.
Yeah.
Somehow I learned that.
Yeah.
Somehow I believed that.
Yeah.
And so as a young adult and going into the workforce, now I got to figure out, now how do I adjust that?
Yeah.
How do I give people an opportunity to be themselves before I have already labeled them? Right? So how do I sift through some of those messages, and or how do I push pause or stop? Otherwise, it continues with you.
Yeah. That's
And it shows up at work.
Yeah.
Shows up at church.
Yeah.
Shows up in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
If we're gonna go back there, then that means we might have to say something about mama. We might have to say something about daddy. Might have to say something about grandpa or grandma or auntie, because maybe that's where some of those messages came from.
Yeah.
And we're not always ready to say, because I mean, I love my mama, but my mama did say such and such to me. You know, you may have to say that.
Yeah.
And we don't want to admit that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's mama, or that's daddy, or that's grandpa.
Yeah.
But that's where it came from.
That's good.
And so if we say it, then what does that mean? What does that say about my grandpa? If I said that grandpa told me leave those black people alone, or leave those white people alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to admit that. And most of us don't ever want to do that.
Yeah, it's hard for us to, you know, throw dirt on
the people we love.
the people we love, our ancestors.
Right.
So that's
that's white,
challenge.
black, Asian, Muslim.
Exactly.
I mean, that's all races of people.
Yes, that's a good note to end on.
Yes.
It's a problem that affects all of us.
Yes.
That we all have to do a part in trying to
address.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.